Being a basketball coach is a lot harder than what you may realize, but if you stick around to the end of the video, you'll hear all of the things that I wish I knew before I became a coach.
Fakes a return pass, but instead gives the ball to number 8.
That's where you fell into a trap.
What is good, everybody out there? Thanks again for checking into another episode of Court Thoughts, the channel where we basically talk basketball. Just this weekend was the end of my very first season as a head coach for a men's team, and I found that going into the experience, there really wasn't a lot of resources, and I knew that I was going to make a video about all the things that I learned in my first year and all the little things that I wish I knew. There's a lot of resources and stuff out there about, how to run a training session and defensive tactics and building a principle, all this sort of stuff, but there isn't anything that's an honest review and an honest breakdown on what it's like to be a coach, because there's some people out there that can really benefit, I think, that could really benefit from hearing this information, and I know I would have been one of them. So I wanted to go through and provide a breakdown on my overall experience. But in order for that to make sense, I've got to give you a little bit of background. How I became a coach was actually a little bit different. So coming into this season, at the beginning of the season, I was announced as captain for the team that I play for. The last year's captain was going to be a player coach. Coming in to a couple of games after that, the player coach shared with me and the other assistant coach that he didn't feel that he was able to do both. And like I said, kudos to him for trying, because it is tremendously difficult. And he asked me if I would step in and basically take on the role, if I would go in and be a head coach. Initially, I was a little bit reluctant just because of the fact that I want to still play. I want to play. I still have the absolute passion to play, and I wasn't prepared to be a full-time coach, but I was happy to have a crack at being a player coach. And so he was all for it, and we basically decided that between the three of us, we would basically substitute those roles. So I would go into a player coach and he would take on the captain role. Initially, my expectations were that I was going to be able to do both. And I kind of learned, I would say, I really came to terms with it after about 4 games that I personally couldn't do both either. I thought that I was going to be able to do both, and I thought at least I would have a go at it, and it didn't pan out. I think that there's a level of approach that you have to have in regards to the game of basketball for you to be a player coach. I can't do 2 things at once in that way. Like, even just thinking about things like just playing and calling a timeout is not a problem. It's really not that hard to be able to realize that you need to call a timeout. But playing and being able to run substitutions and minute management, it's non-existent. It's so difficult. That was probably one of the hardest things to be able to do. So I made the decision about 4 or 5 games into it that I was going to commit to participating in training and still staying active in the training aspect of things, stepping out when I needed to have complete oversight of the whole team. But I was primarily going to send my focuses on game day to being a head coach. And in doing so, I set myself a couple of goals. I knew that I was going to embrace the challenge. I don't do things half-heartedly. If I do something, I think that you need to give the task all the respect that it deserves by doing it to the best of your ability. And so in being a coach, I knew in order for me to have some success, I needed to set some goals, because I wanted to make it measurable. I wanted to challenge myself, but I also wanted to be able to look back at the end of the season like I am right now and see, where did I sit? How did I sit on the mark of where I wanted to be and where I was? So I'm going to start off by sharing with you guys my key goals that I set for the season and how I went about them and all that good stuff. I'm going to give you some timestamps in the description field below. So if you want to skip around to areas, feel free to just check that section out because it'll help you out. Now, the first goal that I set for myself was I wanted to be able to qualify for the finals. And I had a stretch target of being able to win a championship. Now, I knew that winning a championship was tremendously difficult. It's going to be a tremendously difficult task. And that early in the season, we didn't really get to see a lot of the skill level of some of the other teams, but I knew that in my heart that I wanted to be able to qualify for the finals. That was my main sort of initial goal. I thought if I can hit that qualifying for the finals, that was going to be a really good sort of starting point. I knew in order to be able to achieve that I had to build from the baseline up. Now, what do I mean by that? I knew that I needed to invest very strongly in my DP and train on squad, my development player squad and my train on squad, because I personally believe that if the guys that are at the lower end of the totem pole, so to speak, they are your foundation. They are your absolute foundation. So if they work hard, the guys above them are going to have to work even harder because they're chomping at their heels. They want to get their minutes, you know, and the train on guys are there to try and look to make a really good impact to come back the next year and earn a position. So I knew that if I developed and pushed the DP space, that it was going to make it a lot easier to try and develop and push the overall level of play. The last goal that I set for myself in order to achieve both of those things was I needed to develop my knowledge as a coach. I have the knowledge and IQ set as a player, and that is a very, very different mindset that you need to have in the way of being a coach. Some of those things overlap, but some of them don't, and some of them are quite different. How did I get all this to take place? Well, I started to take some action, and I'm going to start off by just describing how I developed the DP skill set, how I developed my development player skill set. To give you an idea on the volume of players that I had within my squad, we have a 12-man rotational roster. So that basically means that there's 12 men that can be signed on to play at any given day. And initially at the beginning of the year, we started with, I think, somewhere in the 14 bracket because we had some sort of drop in and drop out and sort of situations at the beginning, which did make it a little bit difficult because we were just looking to try and get the most skilled guys in our roster. We really did want to try and push to have an improved performance on last year. And so the DPs, or the volume of DPs that we had as a baseline, we had 5 DP players. So these are guys basically that can go from consistently training with us with the potential of being called up to play as a rostered player, but without the expectation being that they are going to play every single game, or even if they do get called up, they may not get the opportunity to play. And so within the DP space, I had varying levels of IQ. I had guys that played youth league basketball before, or were primarily sort of within that pocket of skill set. I had guys that had played overseas and were looking to try and develop their skill set whilst living here in Australia. And then I also had some other guys who had played for other organizations and again were looking to try and better themselves. And I was really, really invested in their development. I was very open and honest with them about the idea that I wanted them to be able to do better. And I did tell them, I want you guys to be performing better and better and better, and that I'm going to hound them the most. And the reason for that is because I want them to push the roster players. Sometimes it can get a little bit stale with roster players when they don't feel like they're being challenged, but if I have the development guys pushing their skill sets further and further, the guys that are roster players get really nervous. And so I wanted to try and push that forward. I also wanted to give them an open, I hate the phrase open door policy, but I wanted them to feel comfortable with being able to come to me to ask for feedback, to share their frustrations, but even just being able to get open and honest criticism or feedback directly to their face. I would not, if they wanted to know why they weren't playing, if they wanted to know why they weren't a rotational player or whatever the case was, I knew that for me, based on my own previous experiences, that it wouldn't help them in sugarcoating anything, that I would be direct with them. If I felt that they were undersized, if I felt that they were underskilled, that I would tell them these things, but I would then give them the information of what I think that they could do to help get better in that space, or what the team would need of them, or what gaps I have that they have the potential to fill. So then that way they knew where they could work towards. And it was constant guidance and constant feedback. And I found that that was definitely something that I knew from the outset that I was going to do. And it definitely did make the process a lot easier when it came to developing the team. I also knew that in order for me to achieve my goal, which was of getting to the finals, that I needed to develop my knowledge. Coming into the assistant coach role, I had never been in a situation where I had coached at all. So I had no concept of time management when it came to like minute distribution. I had no experience in running substitutions besides being able to realize player A is tired, so let's get player B involved. And some of them are really easy and straightforward, like straight swaps, but sometimes it's not as comparable. And the other thing was I didn't have any experience in regards to developing play systems or develop training sessions or anything like that. So I needed to do some research in being able to help me do that. I spent a lot of time researching coaches, and the 3 coaches that I would say I fell in love with the most in regards to their philosophies, their principles, and just their overall approach to the game was Phil Jackson. Phil Jackson for me is probably one of the greatest basketball minds. Phil Jackson was absolutely someone that I was looking at because I wanted to adopt his player personality, like how he develops his relationship with players, his approach to trying to get people to engage in having a very team-orientated way of basketball. But I also wanted to adopt the rigidity and the no-nonsense style of play that Greg Popovich is very well known for having within his teams. Again, very selfless style of play, doesn't want a very singular operating rhythm in the way of how his teams play. They want ball movement. And the last coach that I spent a lot of time researching and understanding was Zeljko Obradovic.
What do you want, Costa? Now you ask me what to play, huh? So all the life, you wait for me, okay? All the life, and all of you. Not after that you get problem, okay?
Zeljko actually is one of the most revered basketball minds in EuroLeague basketball history. I'm a fan of the European style of play in this openness and selflessness that everyone is expected to shoot, everyone is expected to be able to pass, everyone is expected to be able to do everything. And it very much adopts a very similar style of play to sports like football, where you just move the ball. Like it's a tactic, it's a game of tactics. It's not solo, one-on-one, try to shake and bake, like one-on-one ISO ball. I don't think that works against smart defenses. And I think that moving the ball is really key in being able to develop your team successfully and having these principles. But he's a very, very well-known, hard-headed coach. And he demands respect and he demands performance. And I feel like those 3 coaches to me were the guys that I wanted to sort of encapsulate if I was to take bits and pieces from all 3 of those absolute fantastic, great basketball minds, that to me would help me get better. I knew that I wanted to introduce a series of principles. Some of the clubs that I've played for previously have been very formulated. They've been very organized in the way that they would run certain things. There would be strict codes around training times, performance. There would also be other things around expectations, roster sizes. So all these things were a little bit more formulated. Now, the club that I play for is a much smaller organization, and so the level of support that's there is not going to be there as what you would have for a very large feeder club. So I needed to try and develop some key principles that my team was going to operate on. And they were all going to operate on it, and I was absolutely going to operate on it, as well as the other coach, the other assistant coach. And the principles were on, it ended up becoming an acronym called A.C.E, but the key principles are accountability, commitment, and energy. If you don't give me all three of these things, I don't want you on my team. It's really what it comes down to. Accountability is all about, if I ask you to do something, you need to do it to the best of your ability. If I ask you to run a play and understand them from all positions, it's because I need you to understand all positions, because you may be required to play all positions. Or I know that if something happens and I have to make an adjustment, I don't have to cater towards your lack of effort in trying to understand how the team works. That to me feeds directly into the next part, which is commitment. If you need to be at training at 7 o'clock, okay, we start at 7 o'clock. That doesn't mean you walk in the door at 7 o'clock. It means you're there with your shoes on, ready to go, stretched, ready to rock and roll at the time that I call the whistle. Once I blow that whistle, you're able to run to the center court and we can keep that going. And also energy. Energy is a big part for me in order for the team to try and drive and build momentum. If you're looking to try and get into coaching, I would definitely say feel free to take these principles. Like accountability, commitment, and energy for me is so important. And it's something that I pride myself on holding myself to the highest standard, whether it's as a player or whether it's as a coach. And if you want to go ahead and do it, please feel free to take it. Just make sure you like and subscribe to the channel. It absolutely does help. I knew that in order for me to be able to make the finals and hopefully win a championship, that I had to do all of these things to the best of my abilities and really put in the effort. How did I go? Well, unfortunately, I didn't make the finals, but we literally lucked out by a couple of points. So the first 6 would qualify in making it through to the finals, and we finished 7th. We had a couple of games where we just fell behind the 8 ball, and really, I don't put it down to anything else other than just the tumultuousness. At the beginning of the year, we had these changes with the coaches and me coming in on board. There was a lot of opportunities that I had to be able to try and perform better, but I just didn't know any better. And so I was finding out after. There was definitely shortcomings in that way. We also had player roster rotations where we had guys join the team and leave the team along the way for various different reasons. I was able to put it into perspective. I was able to look at it and go, okay, I wanted to make the finals and I literally lucked out by the skin of my teeth. Like it came down to like one game. I'm not completely like at a loss, like, oh my God, my rookie coach season, I didn't make the finals. It's an absolute blessing, the wins that I got, and it's an absolute learning from the losses that I have. But what other learnings did I have? Well, let me share my shortcomings, because I think that this is probably one of the things that I wish I knew. The first thing that I would say that was my biggest shortcoming was that I really wasn't ready or prepared to take the task on. I came into the season and prepared going in as a player mindset. And I started the season going in as a player mindset. And even when I took on the role, I started as a player coach and then slowly weaned down to the idea that I was just going to be a coach. I was just going to be a straight up and down coach. There was definitely some things that I was able to learn, and I will share my key learnings in a moment, but that start was just too big of a deficit, and my knowledge gap was too big just because I really wasn't prepared to take it on board. I literally was going in and trying to figure out how to run training sessions and what practices I was going to do to try and get them to come into play. My prioritization and my planning really wasn't my strongest skill set. For me as a coach, I definitely was very reactive. Now, as a coach, you're going to be reactive with certain things. So like, for example, play reactions. I don't know what defense that the opposition is going to play, because sometimes I'm playing against these teams and I've never seen them before. Or we're playing against them and I see them run something, it's going to get me to react and to draw up a play or say, we need to run this play or whatever the case. Going into the season, there was play sets that we had that ran off of one system. And I didn't plan to try and diversify our skill sets of our plays. I introduced a couple of plays and some of them we had a lot of success with, and I was really, really proud of that. But I definitely would say that things like minute assignments, I had a lot of difficulty with. So myself and the assistant coach, we would have a very close-knit relationship where I would say, hey, at this minute, tell me where we're at. Tell me what the, like, tell me if there's guys that are sitting too short, if they're sitting down for too long, sorry. Because I want guys to be hot. I feel that you got to strike while the iron's hot, right? You got to get everyone hot and everyone engaged. But if guys are performing, then they're going to stay on for longer. And we were definitely overstacked with certain positions. So our most overstacked position space was from the 1 through to the 3. I would say 80% of my roster was within that pocket. The 2 best players that I had immediately took up 2 of those roles. And when I say it, they were the best 2 on-ball defenders within the league. Both of these guys each had late 30-point games. They had, one of them had like a 40-point game as well. So I had performers. I had absolutely performers, veteran guys that I expected them to have heavy rotational minutes. But then that does mean that being able to run those substitutions and minute distribution was a little bit late. So I feel like from those shortcomings, I was able to learn some things. And one of the first things that I had is that you need to have a plan of attack when it comes to roster rotation. Coming into the games, I knew what team I would start the game off with. I knew what my starters would essentially be, but I would basically look at how the game was going and go, okay, we're lacking size now, or we're lacking energy now, or we're lacking rebounds now. And I would be very reactive and go, okay, player A, get in for player B. Now, the way that I organized my minute distribution was I primarily worked with a 3-tier system in regards to how my minutes would be distributed. And I'm going to give it to you so you can use it to your own benefit. Now, the first tier that I had, my top tier, were guys that were going to play potentially 7 or more minutes in the quarter. Now, here in Australia, we work on FIBA rules, so there's 10-minute quarters. And so these guys could potentially play 7 or more minutes. These guys were absolutely key core components to the overall function of my team. These guys are the best defenders that I have. These are the best and most functional and knowledgeable IQ guys that I have within my complete roster that I knew were absolute game changers. If they weren't a benefit on one end, they were a benefit in another end or another end. They were multifaceted and multi-skilled players. And the only real reason that I would take them out is if they were injured or tired, or we got to later in the game and we had the opportunity to put some DPs in and give them some exposure. The next that I had was my mid-tier guys. Now, these guys are absolutely knowledgeable players. These guys are my second string players, so they're going to be the guys that I'm going to add in to add a real big punch. They have a very specific skill set and they are multifaceted, but not necessarily as strong as the primary starters that I have or the primary core components. Now, these guys would also potentially start games. They can swap in and out of that starting rotation roster, and they're going to play anywhere between that 4 to 7 minute window, okay? They can even play potentially more than that depending on the roster and any other sort of random situations that would happen, but I would basically guarantee those players about 4 minutes a quarter. They would be playing at least 4 minutes. All right, and they're going to come in and they're going to fill in, and I would rotate around the top tier. And the bottom end that I had, they would potentially have anywhere up to about 2 to 3 minutes per quarter. Now, sometimes the guys that would sit within that aren't necessarily going to be playing 2 minutes per quarter. They might be specialty players, so they might be DP players. They might be guys that are a little bit young and I need to develop around, but I need to have very controlled minute distribution for them, just so that way I can get the strength out of them. But as soon as the weakness would start to show, or there's an opportunity that I can sort of create some momentum, they're going to be the person that I'm taking out. They're going to be the person that I'm substituting. And again, I do believe that if I had started with some sort of minute distribution at the beginning, it would have helped, but it wasn't the only thing that I learned. There was a couple of other things that I absolutely did learn from. And I think that it also, the experience of being a coach gave me a new level of understanding of not just the game, but player roles. As a player, you come in and you run your tasks and you do everything to the best of your abilities and you do the job that you're told to, you also try to dictate certain things by seeing that there's, we need this improvement on rebounds, and you put in your effort here and talk to people and get them all riled up to try and help push the energy. As a coach, you have to have a game plan. You have to understand the player personnel that you're looking at. You have to understand how to read stats. I definitely knew how to read stats and knew how to interpret that to actions. And if that's something that you would like me to do a video on, like looking at a stat sheet and being able to share what that basically translates to and how I use this information, jump in the comments and let me know, because I'd be happy to do something like that for the CT's Classroom channel series. But it gave me a deeper understanding of the game and how to play the game and how to play the game better. And I know that coming into my next season, coming in as a player, my knowledge is going to be so much sharper because I have that experience. And so I know that I'm able to fulfill more of a leadership role that I didn't know that I am capable of doing. So it was absolutely something that I took away from that. In developing my IQ level, one of the things that I did learn is about play introduction. This board right here, this coach's board, well, I would sit with it and literally put in formations when I looked at game footage and be like, okay, we were here. How could we have done this better? I feel very proud of the achievement that I was able to have. And I feel very proud in being able to take on that responsibility with such a skilled and respectable bunch of guys in the team that I worked with and played with. And it was an absolute pleasure to stand with them and to lead them through the charge. And although that we didn't hit our target of making it to the finals, I know that coming into the next season, I'm coming in, and I know they just as much are coming in ready to rock and roll, ready to come prepared to take another real good swing at it. Do you want me to do more videos around coaches, philosophies, play styles, play moves, all that sort of stuff? If you do, jump in the comments and let me know. And if you enjoyed the video, guys, please consider giving it a thumbs up and subscribing to the channel. It absolutely does help, as your boy is currently trying to push to hit my new goal of 10K subs. And you can be a part of that experience by going ahead and smashing that sub button. But until next time, make sure you're looking after yourself, you take care, and be safe. All right, peace.